So the recording's in progress. So again, welcome everybody. And this is the conversation about the book, A Religion of One's Own by Thomas More. And we are going to kick it right off and get into the introduction. And so the first thing I noticed right away, which was great, I thought he starts off in the first paragraph, which is the question. The question is, should I try to live without it? And he's talking about religion. So he's like, well, do I totally get rid of it? Or should I resist change and keep my religion traditional? Or should I rethink what religion is all about? So immediately what starts off with the book is a questioning. What does this mean for me? And I think that's the beauty of the book as we go through it, is to understanding the questioning. And I know certainly from my own path and my own direction, it was the greatest answers I got is when I was willing to be and remain in the question and allow the universe, allowed spirit, allowed God to come through me and help me answer the questions without putting somebody else's opinion on top of it. So in other words, I learned this amazing, powerful tool called discernment for myself, not for anybody else. And so, you know, you people that listen to me, you know that I'm sitting there saying my path is not necessarily your path. Your path isn't my path or anybody else's path. And yet it is sacred, it is holy, and it is beautiful. And in my opinion, one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself is to go figure out what your path is. And so immediately, right away, he starts this thought or this idea of challenging what's going on. A couple of paragraphs down, he really starts discussing the difference between a religion and soul. And so he really breaks it down. The paragraph, nothing is more important than bringing soul into everything that we do. But there can be no soul without a vivid sense of sacred, without religion. So I think it's beautiful for me personally that he's combining this idea of soul, and we'll get into a deeper discussion about that, with this idea of religion. In other words, religion isn't all bad, and there's some good stuff in there. And what he has found for himself personally is a mixture of the old traditions and yet some new thoughts and new ideas that he can bring in to create his own religion. And I think that's really beautiful. In the paragraph that starts off, I use the word soul, another mysterious word that eludes definition, the way that it comes up in everyday speech. And he just talks about the soul. The next paragraph is in the invisible, the mysterious, the softly radiant element that infuses your being and makes you human. I love that. I love that. So that's the person, that's the you that's involved with this process, the part that we don't forget about, the part that we get to keep. And it is our identity as this amazing being. And then I really think it's fun in the next paragraph. He said, it starts off with, without soul, we in our world are dead. Right? Pretty powerful statement. Like, it's really important. And then a few paragraphs later, it starts off, the paragraph that starts with, people often focus on the spiritual side of religion. But then he goes on to make an argument that says, but religion also has a soul. And I think sometimes in the modern day New Thought era, some people want to just completely dismiss it. And I'm not one of those people. I'm not. I'm going to always be looking back at my traditions. I'm going to be looking at my traditional Christian roots. I'm going to be looking back at my traditional unity roots. And I'm going to appreciate the traditions that were there, again, with the understanding that there's definitely parts of those traditions I'm not a big fan of. And for me personally, it's deciding or discerning which ones I want to keep and which ones I want to let go, right? All right. So a couple of paragraphs down, just before, there's a section that's titled A Religion with a Soul. Above that, there's a paragraph that starts off and it says, the disappearance of religious feeling goes hand in hand with the loss of the soul. But then it goes on, traditional religion may well need an overhaul from top to bottom, but personal religion is a requirement. Personal religion. Notice he's not saying a religion. He's just saying a personal religion. Why? Because that makes you who and what you are. You are no longer living in a box. You are no longer stuck within this identification as this religion or this religion or this religion or this religion. In other words, what I've been able to do as a result of this journey is to really look at the beauty in all religions and see, you know, there's a thing within all of them that really are beautiful. And if I really wanted to do a deeper dive into some of the other religions, I have looked at several of the other religions, but I'm not going to lie to you and tell you, oh yeah, I've done a deep dive into Judaism or Buddhism or any of the other major religions. Do I have a basic understanding? Sure. And I think that some of the stuff is really, really beautiful. But what I love, again, is this ability to be able to use your discernment to figure out what you want to keep and what you want to let go of. In the section that's called Religion with the Soul, when you're religious in a deep way, you sense the sacred in things, the faint and the mysterious. And I totally believe that as well. Like I can look at the profane and the profound in any given moment, depending on the situation and what's going on, right? I'm going to skip forward into the section that's called A New Secularism. There's a few paragraphs down, the paragraph that starts off with, strangely, my personal religion becomes more individual as I study the various traditions, right? And so what's happening is he's taking a little piece over here, he's taking a little piece over here, he's taking a little piece over here, and he's creating a combination, and that combination is making his own religion. And you'll see as he continues to discuss this process, he actually starts including things outside of religion, quote unquote, that he adds to his own religion, whether it's a poet, whether it's an artist, whether it's a saint, whatever. He adds a couple of different things. He talks about, I love this idea when he talks about his wife and her Sikhism. Or in other words, she got really involved with the Sikh and Sikhism, a religion. And he talked about how she influenced him. And he goes on to say, the paragraph starts off, I can recommend this practice for you. If you have a spouse or a friend pursuing a spiritual life different from yours, and this person is willing to talk with you without trying to convert you, listen. I love that. I love it. There's a paragraph, a few paragraphs down, that starts off and says, every day I add another piece to the religion that is my own. I love that. Your religion should never be stagnant. I always say this, that my own spiritual journey, I'm always changing. Look, if you've been around me, you've seen me look at a lot of different things. I mean, but there's this sense that I think you can play with all of it. And it's just me trying to get a little bit of a different feel, because as I grow and change, then I grow and I change. And so what might have been really interesting to me 10 years ago or 15 years ago or 20 years ago, it's not that I still don't enjoy it. It's just that I've got different interests than I had 15 or 20 years ago. A great example for me that I can share with you is metaphysical studies. So I used to love to take the scriptures and rip them apart and see what the metaphysical understandings of the scriptures were. That was really, really good for me for a while. And now I occasionally will do it on Sunday mornings, but I don't do it as much as I used to do. So it's not that I don't think it's amazing. And for some people, it's a really, really big step for them in their own spiritual growth and journey. But for me, I'm moving on. I've got different interests in terms of my own journey. And what my experience has been is, and I would encourage this, that there should always be something else that's lighting your fire. What is it? I used to ask, a friend of mine, I used to tell, I would ask her, like, so what's firing you up spiritually? What's going on inside of you? What's going on? You know, what is it? There should always be, what's the next thing? I could sit here and talk for an hour and tell you right now all this wonderful, fun stuff that I'm playing with. And it's always been that way. And I believe your journey should always have something that's really getting you excited about your own journey into and figuring out your divinity. A few paragraphs down, he talks about, it's a paragraph that starts with, many people like me have a background. And then he says, the main thing is not to be passive with it, but actively engaged. Yeah, like it's great to show up on a Sunday morning and see everybody, but I would much rather have people show up, but then also want to have discussions after the talk, like, hey, Mike, I'm checking this out. Hey, I'm looking at this book, or hey, I found this other thing I'm looking into that's really got me inspired. That's awesome. I think that is super exciting. There's another section called spiritual creativity. The new kind of religion asks that you move away from being a follower to being a creator. Whoa, that's pretty scary for traditional folks. This is what I mean when I get up in front on Sunday mornings and I say, we don't have, we're not in a box. Unity people we're not stuck in a box. We actually think outside of the box, because we are actually going to be audacious enough to say, you know what, I'm good. I think this has been great. Thank you, but I'll take it from here. And I think everybody should get to that point to where they're willing to stand on their own and go, I'm going to take it from here, and trust what's inside of them to guide them to whatever's next for them. Again, that comes from listening. It comes from discernment. It comes from slowing down and trusting, right? All right, I'm going to skip kind of quite a ways ahead. I'm in the section that's still called a secular religion, but it's a paragraph that starts with, so what are our choices? We could also make do with some vague and bland notion of spirituality. I opt for religion rather than secularism. So in other words, he's going to be, if he had to make a choice between no religion and religion, he's going to pick religion. I just think it's an interesting point. Again, to me, I resonate with that, because while there is a part of me that wants to let go of the dogma, specifically in the religion, I'm not wanting to let go of the spirit of it. So I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. All right. And much further ahead in the section called the sacred Melu, whatever, I don't know how you pronounce that. There's at the very last paragraph. And so we arrive at another key principle of the book. You can discover the sacred and the divine inside or outside a church or other spiritual organization. Yeah, again, that's death to organized religion. And yet we're not afraid to say that. We're not. And I'm certainly not afraid to say that. It's true. In the section, where is God in all of this? I love this. So I love it because he says in a few paragraphs into that chapter, the paragraph that starts with, and so my religion has the word God in it, but it is used sparingly. I think some people get so tripped up on that word, and I get it and I understand it. But just so everybody knows, I use the word God, but I'll also use intelligence. I'll also use mother, father, God. I got like 7 or 8 different things that I say. I don't call it one thing. I call it a lot of different things. But God is one of them. So I know some people have a reaction to that. But there you go. All right. So that's the introduction. So now we're going to dive into chapter 1. And I'm going to start talking about that, the spiritual traditions of today. And within the second paragraph that starts with, for some, the answer is to resist change in culture. He says, there's a sentence that says, I recommend a new and deeper way of being religious, not just spiritual, that can satisfy both believers and seekers. I love that. I love that. And then he starts talking about, even to the point to where it can include somebody that's an atheist, which I love, because I find most atheists are some of the most spiritual people I know. One of my best friends is an atheist, and he is one of the most spiritual people I know. And it's interesting to watch him as he gets older and he's living life, and he's starting to understand where his atheism came from. And now he's starting to understand, maybe I misunderstood this thing. And I'm not saying that's necessarily the case for all atheists, but I love the fact that he addresses that whole thing. I love it when he calls it, skeptics call this freer approach to religion of the world the cafeteria approach. I love that. It's like, so we're walking up to a cafeteria and we're going, hey, I think I'll take a little bit of this, and I'll take a little bit of this, and I'll take a little bit of that. So I love that concept or that idea. In the section called Many Traditions, Many Wisdoms, I love it. That very first sentence, spiritual traditions around the world, large and small, have 2 major gifts they offer: wisdom and beauty. Wisdom and beauty. I love that. In the next paragraph down that starts off with, this is one of the main differences, where he says, the point is to not join the right group, but to find resources that will take you deep into your search and give you penetrating insights. Yes, you go out and find the resources. That's why I'm always looking at different things. I'm always recommending different books, different people, different places. Go try this, go do this, go look at this. I'm a resource person because this is my life. This is what I do. And I love that. The next section is called Reading as a Spiritual Practice. I love the idea that he's coming up and just saying, hey, there's some things you might want to consider doing with your own religion. Reading might be one of them. So I love that. Later on in that section, he starts the one paragraph off. He says, you could create a special shelf of books. I'm a huge book person. Anybody that knows me knows I'm a huge book person. And I would just say that books are amazing. He talks about this beautiful practice that I'm just learning about. I was just exposed to this. I was not aware of this until about 6 months ago when I had a friend of mine introduce me to the Lectio Divina. And that's a practice, a Catholic practice. And it talks about the different process of that. And then he said how he's kind of tweaked that a little bit. But really, when you read it, it has the 4 parts: reading, meditating, praying, and contemplating. It's so interesting. I was listening to a traditional minister. Occasionally, I still do that. I just turn on the radio just to hear what they're talking about. And it was so funny because he was actually saying that to contemplate or think about anything would be considered sinful. It was just like, he literally said, we don't want you thinking about anything. In other words, take it hook, line, and sinker. Don't think about it. Don't question it. And I was just like, oh, it just hurt to hear him say that, but it's still out there, right? It's still out there. A key idea in the tradition, and now he's going to go through in that section. The reason I like it is because he goes through each one of the spiritual traditions and he talks about the different gifts that each one of them has. For example, the Tao Te Ching, it's called the Dark Enigma. And then he talks about the 4 instructions from the Gospels. And then the Sufi poets, he talks about that. He talks about, Joan, there's your St. Francis. He talks about St. Francis and the Jewish tradition, the Kabbalah tradition. So just, he likes to pull from different traditions to figure something out for him. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Where it says borrowing ideas and practices. And he talks about the tradition that he created with his children, which I think is absolutely beautiful. I think it's just beautiful when he talks about the way that him and his kids decided, hey, what do we want our little tradition to be when we get together and talk about the divine and God? And they create it, and he talks about that. And I think it's really beautiful. Excuse me. The spirituality of daily life is really the story about his wife. But the thing I want to highlight is there's a paragraph in that section that's called What I Appreciate as author David Chadwick's. Down later in that paragraph, specifically, he says, maybe that this is the lesson for us. Don't take the traditions as they're offered. Struggle with them. Work hard at extracting only what is valuable in them and be ready to discard the dross or that which doesn't serve you. So get rid of it. So study them, look and see what you like and what feels good to you, but then be willing to let go of the rest of them. Okay, this you're going to be shocked that I highlight this paragraph, but it's so much fun. 2 paragraphs down from that starts with this is close to my assessment when I say a little atheism can keep your faith in God honest, but too much can destroy your religion. So it's good to be skeptical. I like being skeptical somewhat, but you can take someone and here's the line. You take someone from being a skeptic, which I think is healthy and good, to becoming a cynic. Cynicism, which is not, then not, no, I don't believe in any of it. No matter what you say, it's not, that's where, to me, the line where you got to be careful. In the next section, tradition as a resource. I love the paragraph. The theology of unknowing is necessary for a theology of knowing, because without it, God would not be worshiped as infinite, but rather as a creature. That would be idolatry. That's a profound statement. That is a profound statement, and I love that. He talks about later in that section, I'm going to screw up the pronunciation of this, liturgical, which is just have a calendar for yourself that marks important holidays for you during the year. And that might be a very traditional calendar, Easter, Christmas, everything in between. It might have dates when somebody was born, when somebody passed. It might have different things that are important to you that you might want to think about creating. I love the thought. I love the idea of having it. The next section, he really gets to talking about Emerson a lot. I love the comment in the paragraph that starts in the Divinity School address. And then he says, Emerson criticizes Christianity for emphasizing the personality of Jesus and yet making little of his humanity. I've often said that I think one of the biggest, the saddest things about Jesus is I think he lived an amazing life, but I think it was very regular. I think it was a regular kind of guy. And I think he lived his life, and I think he had good days, and I think he had bad days, and I think he struggled, and then I think he was amazing, and I think he had everything in between, but we don't get that in the story. We just get the miracles and all that stuff. And I really think the word miracle, they talk about that. It gives a false impression. It's a monster. It is not one with the blowing cover and the falling rain. And his point that he's making is now we've put miracles at such a high level that we can't walk outside. And for those of you that listen to my talk about watching a spider weave its web and how magical that was for me when I went on my vision quest. So and to me, that was as much of a miracle as Jesus walking on water. And when you can all of a sudden understand that any moment has miracles within it, that it doesn't have to be something so profound, things change within yourself. And I think that is really, really beautiful. And he talks about that in the following paragraph. A couple of paragraphs down, and then we're almost done. He talks about the paragraph that says, Emerson doesn't recommend making new religions because you can't manufacture a religion. And then he goes on to say the best way is to live a more soulful life, allowing for mystery and arranging life around the mystery. It brings up a point that I want to share with people, and I'll say this once in a while when I'm up talking on Sunday mornings. And that is this. I am completely comfortable with the fact that I don't know everything, especially when it comes to somebody else's relationship with God and the way the universe works. In fact, I love not knowing everything because that gives me part of the mystery of this thing called life. And I find that when I'm trying to make sure that I understand everything, it's just a control thing and it's my ego, not really me being in the wonder of life and allowing and trusting the process to unfold. The next section, just a couple of things about religion in the last section. The paragraph that says, oh, this is it. To create a religion of one's own, start by never again sensing any conflict between any one religion or another. Pretty cool. What a thought, right? And then the one paragraph that starts, the one ingredient missing in much of modern spirituality is intelligence. I love this. And he goes on to explain that a little bit more. And then at the very end of the chapter, he finally comes back to this idea of returning back to his original traditions and how much he appreciates once he's stepped back and started looking at all of it. There was a part of him that still likes going back to the tradition, which I think is beautiful. I think that's absolutely beautiful. All right, so I am going to pause the recording and stop that. Hold on.